Okay, so good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Thursday, June 11th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting for the City of Walnut Creek. This meeting is by teleconference only. And for those of you joining us at home who might be interested, you can join the conference through Zoom on webinar ID 963-7025-8434, and the password is 087171. So with that, we'll go ahead and start this evening's meeting and ask the Commission Secretary to call the roll.
Just like to note for the record, thank you, that the governor's executive order, if you'd like to read that into the record before we begin, Mr. Chair.
As stated earlier, this meeting is by teleconference only. This meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of the government's executive order, which suspends certain requirements of the Ralph M. Brown Act. Teleconference locations are not open to the public. And as stated earlier, to provide for the live remote public comment, please do join our Zoom teleconference meeting. And just once again, real quickly, the meeting ID is 963-7025-8434 and password 087171.
Thank you.
So thank you, Commissioner Secretary. Please go ahead and call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Pickett.
Here.
Commissioner Strongman.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Ward.
Here.
Commissioner Reiser.
Here.
Vice Chair Kerselik.
Here.
And Chair Lezak.
Here.
All seven are present. We may conduct business.
Thank you, Commissioner Secretary. We'll go ahead and move to the consent calendar. I do not see any items on the consent calendar. Commissioner Secretary, are there any items for this evening's consent calendar?
There are none this evening.
Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda, which is public communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items that are not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the Commission cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer to items to staff. So at this point, we're going to ask if any member of the public wishes to provide public comment. And if you do, please use the raise the hand feature on Zoom. Or I believe that it is possible for you to call in. Commission Secretary, do you have anyone who is raising their hand for public comment, or are there any items that for any other information for folks to call in?
For those who may be calling in via phone, I just in order to raise your hand, you hit the *9 feature that will indicate to staff that you wish to make a public comment if you are dialing in by phone. Otherwise, if you're using the Zoom app as indicated by the chair, use the raise hand feature. Looking down the list of attendees, I am not seeing anyone raising their hand to make a public comment this evening.
Except for me. I don't have a raised hand, so I would like to make a public comment. Okay.
Okay, seeing no other member from the public, Melissa Ward would like to make a public comment.
Thank you. Good evening. As most of you know, I am Melissa Ward. I'm a 19-year resident of Walnut Creek, mom to 3 amazing kids. I'm a community volunteer, a lawyer at a local law firm, and of course, a commissioner on this planning commission. I'm making this comment on my own behalf and not in my capacity as a planning commissioner. I promise to protect and defend the Constitution, and I take that responsibility very seriously. In particular, the First Amendment is vital to the maintenance of our free country and form of government, with its guarantees of our rights to freedom of speech, of religion, and of the press, and the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances, that is to say, to openly protest and object to what the government is doing. I must acknowledge that my experiences with the police for my entire life have been positive, collegial, and supportive. The Walnut Creek Police Department in particular has always been there on those few occasions when I've needed them, and they've been a tremendous help and support to my clients in countless ways. They are unquestionably good people and good police officers. I have attended many protests at Civic Park and in the streets of downtown Walnut Creek without incident. However, I must acknowledge that these experiences may stem from my highly privileged position, which includes the color of my skin, which, as you can see, is very, very white. Democracy is not tidy, and our storied tradition of civil disobedience in the face of injustice is not always pleasant, such as Monday, June 1st, when a group of protesters wrongfully entered and blocked the 680 freeway after splitting off from the Civic Park protest. They were wrong, but our police department's response was disproportionate to the threat presented. We used weapons of war and threats of violence against unarmed protesters engaged in civil disobedience to protest the tyranny of a government which has engaged in systematic and institutionalized racism, particularly against Black people, and has repeatedly and persistently allowed and encouraged a system whereby Black people's encounters with our local police departments end in death. Announcing over a loudspeaker that protests must move or be dead, or gassed, or whatever was allegedly said on that video, the use of tear gas, a chemical weapon of war, rubber bullets, even if they only maim rather than kill, and dogs against unarmed people protesting against racial discrimination is unacceptable. Yes, it was wrong for people to go onto the highway. Yes, it was vital to protect people stuck in stopped vehicles. But it was also vital to protect the right of the people to protest racism and to object to the use of excessive force by the police. Patience and de-escalation in these situations is our policy, and rightly so. We need to investigate why we were apparently so quick to abandon that policy and treat our fellow protesting citizens as hostile combatants. Surely there was a better way of handling the situation than quickly jumping to tear gas and rubber bullets. We all should object to systemic racism and government-backed murder of people based on the color of their skin. Equal treatment under the law and the right to encounter the police without being hurt or killed cannot be just for people who look like me. These rights are for everyone, regardless of the color of their skin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Ms. Ward. And Commission Secretary, at this time, I'd like to ask if there's any other members of the public who joined us and would wish to make public comment at this time.
You're muted, Ethan.
Commission Secretary, just to confirm, I want to confirm that there's no other members of the public who wish to comment. If you would unmute yourself and confirm that for us, we can move forward.
I've tried to raise my hand. Can you not see that I'm trying to raise my hand? Hello?
Hold on, Diane. We hear you, but I am looking for some confirmation from the Commission Secretary to introduce you if you are interested in making public comment.
Apologies, I was muted. Asking Diane if she's muted. I'm muted myself. Apologies. Diane, can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you. Diane, please proceed with your comment. We do have 3 minutes allotted.
Okay, I didn't prepare an eloquent comment like the last one that was given. So bear with me because I'm doing this extemporaneously in response to what was just said. But I appreciate the fact that we don't want the police in Walnut Creek exerting excessive force. I appreciate that there are some bad apples in the police force, but I'm going to echo that my experience with Walnut Creek Police has been historically good, and I've been a resident of Walnut Creek since 1956, so quite a long time. I I have a business in downtown Walnut Creek that had to be boarded up, and I'm absolutely aghast at the videos. I was down there with the contractor boarding up the business when there was gunfire a block and a half away, and somebody was shot. And I've seen the videos of the pillage and destruction that went on completely unabated in downtown Broadway Plaza. And I'm aghast at the fact that the Walnut Creek police didn't use tear gas and didn't stop all those looters from ransacking those stores and destroying and hurting our businesses. I think it should have been done. I saw probably a 5-minute video that showed the police standing at the end of the plaza, just watching these looters destroy the property. And I don't support the fact that the police did not stop that. I do realize that they kind of surprised the police because they were prepared the following day when it was scheduled, but they weren't prepared on Sunday when it actually happened. But I feel like they should have used tear gas. They should have done something to abate it. And I also support the fact that that they did use tear gas on the freeway because they were asked. The protesters were asked to leave the freeway. Everybody knows you can't run through a freeway and stop traffic, and it's a very dangerous thing. And they were able to break up the group quickly after they did that. So I'm going to respectfully disagree, and I'm going to kind of lodge an objection to the lack of force that should have been used to defend the assets of the Walnut Creek businesses.
Okay, thank you, Diane, for that comment. Mr. Commission Secretary, do we have any others that would like to make a public comment at this time?
Looking at the list, I'm not seeing any hands raised. And I would say there are no further public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. So hearing no further public comment, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the public hearing section. We begin with public hearing 4A, which is the project, the Secluded Woods Residential Subdivision. It's a major subdivision tentative map, application Y 15-108. And I believe we'll have a staff presentation.
And Mr. Chair, before the start, if there are any ex parte communications on behalf of the chair or any other members of the commission, now would be a time to announce them.
Go ahead.
I spoke with the staff just to clarify some items in the memorandum.
Thank you.
Anything else from any other commissioners before the staff presentation? Seeing none, go ahead, Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Alan Carrion, Associate Planner with the Community and Economic Development Department. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop screen for the presentation at this time. This application is Y15108. It's a it's a subdivision at 1835 Weaver Lane. The request is for a 12-month extension of the approval granted in 2016. The owner, Mr. Gai Chung, is in our Zoom meeting this evening, and also the project engineer, Mr. Ross Vedian of PA Design Resources, is also available. For some background on this project, the City Council adopted Plan Development Ordinance 2152, which rezoned the property from R10 to Plan Development. The City Council also granted a tree removal permits and tree drip line encroachment permits. The city also conducted environmental review and as a mitigated negative declaration. The analysis indicated that the two structures on the property were eligible for listing in the state's Register of Historic Resources. We'll go into detail, a little bit more detail on that in a second. Part of the plan development also granted exception to the street standards. Typically, a subdivision of this size would require a public street. However, there are extenuating circumstances which the city engineer supported, and the findings were made for this to be a private street, given the facts of the matter. Those deviations also included standards, street geometry, curvature, etc. And the plan development provides for no on-street parking within the subdivision itself. In July 2016, the Planning Commission approved the tentative map. That was subsequent to the rezoning. In June 2018, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and approved a 24-month extension. And at that time also, prior to that decision, the owner erected chain link fencing along the property frontage due to reports of trespass. And we're here this evening to consider a 12-month extension. Just some background on the property. As you can see by the image, the project is located at the northern border of Walnut Creek with City of Concord, right there with the red star. And if we go a little closer, this is the property. The large area above, I'll use the cardinal points here, above the project site, that's Oak Grove Middle School. The site is about 2 acres, subdividing into 7 lots and 6 net new residences. The BART tracks angle at about a 45-degree angle at the top left between Minot Road and David Avenue, just for some wayfinding. The area is residential, R8, and similarly zoned in the City of Concord. Aerial of the project site, we can see Biscay Way to the right, Argonne Drive to the south, and Breton Place on the left. North would be to the left of the image. This is the existing site plan. This is the Smith House. The larger structure is the Smith House, eligible for listing. And at the bottom right is the Major's Cottage, the second structure eligible for listing on the historic resources. As conditions of approval, these structures were required to be preserved through the environmental analysis. The conditions of approval did not compel the owner to do restorative work, just that if any work was conducted, that it be conducted in accordance with state and federal guidelines for historic properties. The original plan was to preserve this structure, not the structure that says shed to the left, just the building upon which that red star is placed. The original plan was to preserve that barn since it has a decent foundation, a slab, given that there's that large tree just next to the building. So that structure was supposed to be preserved in order to protect the tree and would have been the garage for the future structure or future residents on that property. As we can see by the outline of the tree, I believe a 69-inch oak. It was, as you can tell, very large and overhung the property line there to the west. This tree subsequently shucked the branch back in 2017, The owner informed the city and also commissioned the project arborist, his consulting arborist, to evaluate the tree. The project arborist consulted with the city arborist, and the city arborist granted a tree removal permit for that tree because of its structural imbalance and condition, in that the tree could subsequently fail. And so that was done for not only for personal safety, but for safety of the property adjoining. Image from 2016 of the Smith House. This is looking west towards the front elevation. And this is the Major's cottage at the southwest corner of the property. Again, these are required to be preserved in any work done in accordance with federal and state law. And this is that barn structure. The tree 330 was to the left of it. That tree was removed, and because that tree has been removed, this structure can also be removed. It did not qualify for listing on the historic register. Image taken, let's see, what is this? June, mid-May. As you can see, the property owner still maintains the chain link fencing along the property frontage to discourage trespassers. And another image straight on, I'm standing on Smith Lane, which is a former road to the house itself. And this would be the front entry. And this is, you can see the residence here behind I believe that's a maple. And image of the conceptual site plan. These larger trees here are ones to be preserved, and the ones with the branches drawn in would be new trees as part of this concept. These building footprints for the new residences are conceptual only to provide scale and for drainage sizing, including the C3 basins, etc. So this is what the layout would be. And this is, again, tree 330. And just another image. Staff did receive correspondence in response to the public hearing for this. Mr. Ronhar lives on Biscay Way. He expressed concerns regarding the condition of the Smith House and was inquiring on the progress of the owner acting upon the entitlements. And I'm going to defer to Mr. Chung to respond to these concerns, not only to the public, but also to the Planning Commission. The staff has prepared a draft conditions of approval, which staff is recommending the Planning Commission move to adopt. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm standing by for any questions or comments you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, Mr. Carrion. Does any of the commissioners have any questions of staff at this point? Seeing none, I think we will then go ahead and move into the public hearing portion and ask if the applicant would like to make a presentation, and we, as we understand, at least make comment to the Planning Commission. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to the applicant to begin. And as I understand, the applicant would have up to 15 minutes to make their presentation.
Thank you, everyone. This is Guy Chung, the owner of 1835 Weaver Lane. Wanted to address the neighbors' comments. We have continued, ever since I purchased the property, we have continued to work on it. We've addressed every concern of any neighbor or Walnut Creek residents' concerns that have come up. We have worked with PA Design since the beginning and have continued to work with them. We are on our 4th plan check. I could turn this over to Ross. Ross, do you want to let everybody know what we've been working on and where we are as of today? Ross, you gotta unmute.
My name is Ross Abidian with PA Design Resources. We are project planner and civil engineers. As Guy mentioned, we are at the fourth plan check with the city of Walnut Creek.
Excuse me, Mr. Avedian, could you move closer to the microphone? We're having difficulty hearing you. Thank you very much.
Okay. We are at the fourth plan check with the city of Walnut Creek to get approval on our improvement grading and the final map. And we are respectfully requesting a 12-month of extension to complete the project. After getting approval from the city, then we have to do some legal aspect of the project, like the subdivision agreement and other agreement which we have to prepare for final approval.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from the applicant at this time?
Not at this point.
Not at this time.
Very good. Would any one of the commissioners have a question or a comment at this point for the applicant? Okay, seeing none. We have one. Commissioner Ward.
Sorry. So I'm confused about the Smith House. It's current, so it's going to be preserved. And it's going to be part of the subdivision, and you're going to improve and sell it as an individual residence and part of the seven properties that are being divided and sold. Is that correct?
That's correct. It would occupy the largest parcel of the 7 lots.
And similar to that other outbuilding that is going to be another residence, but a smaller one.
That's correct. The only difference being that house is much smaller, and it would serve as the garage/guest house.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other commissioners have a question or comment at this time? The applicant? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open the public comment period to the public. Secretary, do we have any members of the public that would like to comment on this particular item?
Since the beginning of our meeting, our guest list has not changed. And of those present, I don't see anyone raising a hand or indicating, other than one person actually, Diane, is interested in making a comment on this particular item. I'd ask my colleague to please bring her into the meeting. Diane, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I won't take the 3 minutes. I really just had a question. It looks to me like that's the property. I'm a property that I'm familiar with, but I just wanted to ask. In the 60s, I worked on as a young girl. I worked on a restoration of a house near there that was the mother house for the Sisters of Providence for about 20 years, and I'm just wondering if the owner knows, was that the mother house of the Sisters of Providence? Does he know?
I'm not familiar.
Okay, all right. I think that's the history of that, but I'm not sure of the exact address.
When we purchased it, it was under REO, and we were not in touch with the previous owners.
Ask the applicant to refrain from responding to comments made during public comment. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think, I don't know who the Catholic Church sold it to in the 70s, but I just wondered if that was the house that you're talking about, the property. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, for your participation. Commission Secretary, are there any other members of the public that would like to comment at this time?
At this time, Mr. Chair, I don't see anyone else raising their hand or indicating an interest in making a public comment on this item. So I'll say there are no more public comments to be had.
Okay, we will at this point return to the applicant. Would the applicant like to make any closing remarks or rebuttal to any of the comments at this time?
I'm good at this time. Thank you.
Okay, we will ask the commission one last time if they have any questions for the applicant before we close the public hearing portion. And seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. And we will move into the commission deliberation portion. Would any of the commissioners like to be first to provide comments, questions, or perhaps a motion?
With no other comments or questions, I'm happy to move that we approve. Let's see, Secluded Woods Residential Subdivision, Major Subdivision, Tentative Subdivision, Map 9408, Application Y15108. So moved.
Second. I'll second.
You seem to have a second from Commissioner Strongman.
Yes, we do.
I'll take the roll, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Reiser,
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Pickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kurselik,
Yes.
and Chair Lezak.
Yes.
And the ayes have it, 7-0, motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much, and congratulations to the applicant. Look forward to seeing your project come to fruition. We will now move forward in the public hearing agenda to the second item on tonight's hearing, project Toyota Walnut Creek Temporary Vehicle Storage Lot Application number Y19-129. And I believe we have a staff presentation. Take it away, Chip.
If I could intercede before Chip begins, if we have any ex parte communications regarding this item, please.
I've had zero. None.
Thank you.
Any commissioners? No? Okay, sorry.
Thank
for that,
you.
Commissioner
Thank
Secretary.
you,
We'll
Chair
go ahead
Lezak,
and
and
back over.
okay. Thank you, Chair Lezak and Planning Commission. My name is Chip Griffin. I'm a senior planner with the great city of Walnut Creek, and I'm here tonight to present the temporary parking lot for Walnut Creek Toyota. Let me share my screen here. Is that right? No, shoot. We are at the bottom. We're already done. This is project Y19-129, project at 2150 North Broadway. The site, as you can see here in this vicinity map, is located on North Broadway. This is North Broadway heading north, and Pine Street with we've got Civic over here and Main Street over to the left of the screen. The exhibit is north to the top. The site is zoned auto sales and custom manufacturing. It's not only zoned that way, the general plan land use is auto sales and custom manufacturing. It is within the north downtown specific plan boundary, which has the land use of auto sales, service, and custom manufacturing. All zone, so land use and zoning is all the same. Moving forward, here's an aerial of the site. You can see currently the site has a large, a building on it, I should say. It's I believe its last use was as a gym. There is a basement in this building, so the basement would need to be filled. The project would include the demolition of this. You can see that Toyota currently has cars there, and they do own the property. By the way, tonight, the property owner, Adam Sims, will be here with the civil, Al Shagagi, and also Jody Stout, I believe, will be here to maybe make a short presentation and be there to answer any questions. Moving on, this is the proposed site plan. You can see along North Broadway, here's the frontage. There will be the North Downtown Specific Plan asks for includes a wider street section here. So it would include a 7-foot dedication. No improvements are required at this time. When the plan is for Toyota to come back and or to begin, or they've already actually begun developing plans for a dealership extension on this parcel. But in the meantime, they'd like to clear it and use it as a temporary auto store. You can see, and you can see that 7-foot dedication would be right in that area there. If you can see my cursor, can you see that?
No.
So it would come in with an entrance. You can see the entrance. There's a gate, and of course, and it's just auto storage. There's lighting and security on the site. There's a detail here of the swinging gate. Nothing's fancy, just a security gate. It would be open during the day. Moving on. This is a rendering of what it would look like from Broadway. You can see it includes some landscaping in the front, and you can't see them, but there are light standards running down the middle and to the sides, and there are cameras in the back for 24-hour surveillance. The special use permit is required here. Well, A, because auto storage lots are not allowed in the auto sales and service custom manufacturing zone. And since it's a temporary use, we saw fit to a special use permit as the proper entitlement here. The Planning Commission is empowered to grant special use permits in all land use districts, even those where they are not allowed. And there is a special finding. The findings are the same findings for a conditional use permit with one additional one, and that's that the use provides a necessary service for the community. Looking at that special finding again, we've got the zoning, and up at the top, the SCP does allow the Planning Commission to approve uses not allowed by the zoning. When we look at this special finding, we would look at the proximity to the dealership, which is located here. There's one Mike's Auto Body between it. There's 80 feet of frontage between them, so they are very close in proximity. In terms of economic development, Toyota has been selling a lot of cars lately, so they need to keep stock up. It's a temporary use while they develop their plans for expansion, and there will be a right-of-way dedication. And for all those reasons, staff believes that the temporary use permit would provide a necessary service to the community. Sorry. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution approving the SUP as proposed, and there is a condition in there which would end it, would terminate this temporary use permit 2 years from the effective date, which would be likely sometime in June this month. With that, are there any questions of staff?
We'll start with Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you. As you mentioned, standalone vehicle storage is a prohibited use. It's proposed to be approved for 2 years. Should they come back for an extension of that, given that the temporary use is justified basically because it's sort of a transition to a larger redevelopment of the area? Would you think that would be something that the staff would continue to support?
They could come back for an extension or another special use permit. I'm sure that we would be concerned with or want to find out how well their plans are being developed and what their plan is for the property at that time. But there hasn't been any progress.
So if they develop plans, and in fact, the plans call for redevelopment of their current site, and retaining this as vehicle storage only, I assume that that would not be an appropriate permanent solution.
Since they would need to have some type of a dealership or service operation on that proposed on that lot.
Okay.
Straight auto storage would not be allowed.
The other question I had was on condition 18 of the resolution. Just a note, the numbers there for the right of way I think are incorrect.
Condition 17.
Condition 18 indicates a 64-foot width, whereas in fact elsewhere referred to as a 74-foot width, and the half width is also consistent with the 64, but also incorrect, I believe.
I believe that 64 foot is the correct right of way width out of the North Downtown certified. Oh, we'll check that out.
74 feet is what's listed in the staff report. Probably where Commissioner Anderson has seen that.
Okay, we will confirm that if that's the case, and we'll change the resolution.
Okay, appreciate that. That's all I have.
Commissioner Pickett?
A couple of questions. I don't recall seeing anywhere in here that there was a limitation on the number of vehicles that actually end up being stored there. I know that the plans show, I think it's 202 actual striped parking stalls, but is there any limitation that says that's the most they can put on there?
There is not.
Okay, and you didn't think that was important, or didn't think about it, or what?
Being that it's not a public parking lot or for circulation, we did not.
Okay.
There.
Yeah, I just curious. And currently, I think Toyota uses the property on the west side of North Broadway, immediately across from their showroom.
2100, yes.
Are they going to continue to use that, or is this going to replace that usage?
That would be a question of the applicant.
Okay, so when we get to the applicant's presentation, please make note of that and answer that question. And that's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Strongman?
Yes, I noticed or didn't see on the plans a fence or some form to keep people out of the property from the street. Is there going to be something more substantial than just a gate over the driveway?
Well, we've approached them about a fence, and the fence could either be solid or not, and they do not wish to pursue a fence.
Okay.
So when design review comes around, we might talk about strengthening the landscaping to provide some of that visual effect. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commission questions for staff this time? Commissioner Reiser?
Thanks, Peter. Chip, can you refresh our memory on the 7-foot easement that's across there? That's part of the North Downtown specific plan, and is in the future going to be some sort of walkway or that connects BART to Iron Horse or something to that effect, if I remember correctly?
I was just looking at that section the other day. I do believe it, I'm fairly certain that it includes an increased pedestrian bike path, but it's not that shared pathway like we saw a couple weeks ago. But it does accommodate different forms of transportation.
If I could interrupt just quickly, I had confirmation from this city senior engineer on the project that the right-of-way is 64 feet. That was confirmed. So the typo in the staff report misidentified 74 feet as the width of the right-of-way. It is 64 feet as identified in condition 18.
Thank you. Commissioner Reiser, were you?
I'm good. Yes, thanks.
You good?
Jeremy, Zach.
Any other commission questions of staff at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing and ask the applicant to step forward with their presentation, and you have 15 minutes.
Yeah, this is Bob with AMS Associates. And thank you, Mr. Griffin, for doing a good presentation. Just to reiterate, the site is located at 2150 North Broadway and consists of approximately 60,800 square feet or 1.4 acres. There is an existing 12,830 square foot building with landscaping and parking throughout. The existing building will be demolished with approximately 4,300 square feet of asphalt, parking and plant landscape areas, and will be replaced with our gravel pavers for a total of roughly 17,100 square feet of new parking area. Other than that, there is existing 52 parking stalls with the 17,000 square feet of new pervious area. Then we will add another 150 for a total of 202 stalls. Other than that, I think that should, I'll pass it on over to Jody. Jody?
Jody, you're on mute. If you could unmute yourself, please. Jody, you're muted. If you could unmute your microphone.
Well, if she's having a hard time figuring that out, I'll stick around and answer any questions that the council has.
Okay, so I believe that completes the applicant's presentation. Does anyone of the commissioners have a question for the applicant?
Actually, Mr. Chair, I believe there was one other speaker, Brad Barnett. I believe is the general manager for Toyota. I believe he was leaning into the mic as you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Barnett. Please proceed. We wouldn't want to cut your time short. Go ahead.
Hey, no need to apologize. So I'm hiding in my daughter's bedroom. I have 4 kids, so if they come barging in, don't be alarmed. So, so hey, just thanks so much. Just wanted to share. Hopefully, you guys can hear me good. I wanted to share a little bit because obviously we're coming in front of you guys for the first time, with an ask of a special use permit for this parking. I know, parking storage, vehicle storage is not a popular subject. We're looking for this for 2 years. I kind of wanted to just take a few minutes to just share some of the grander scheme of what we're hoping to accomplish here and what the future kind of looks like for us. We're a family owned and operated business. We have 170 employees. When we bought the dealership in 2017, it was obviously, the facility was not up to par. It was struggling. And since then, we have more than tripled the production of what the cars that are sold. So we've sold about 9,500 vehicles over the past, since December of 17. And so that's very exciting. So we've become one of the top Toyota dealerships in Northern California out of 57, stretching from Fresno all the way through the Sacramento market into the Oregon border. And we're doing that out of the facility that we're in. So obviously we are super anxious and going as fast as we can to try and get a new facility and to make it look much better than what it does. Just to share a little bit with you, our vision is to stretch from Broadway to North Main with something that would make you guys really proud. A beautiful dealership encompassing service, probably have some mixed aspects to it. The site where we're proposing to do the special use permit would be a community benefit of a parking garage. with maybe some mixed use as well. And so we're looking at adding over 1 million square feet of revenue producing square footage. And we're also looking at going from the 7 acres that we occupy to 18 plus acres of taxable acreage. So, you know, we're really excited about what the future holds. I assure you, I heard the comment come up about the 2 years. We don't want it to be 2 years. We want to go as fast as we can. And hopefully we don't, you know, we can get through that process as quickly as possible. So just appreciate everybody's support, and I'm open to any questions. This isn't my forte. I'm a car salesman, and there's people on the phone that can help me if necessary, but I just wanted to let you guys know I'm the general manager and operator, and I live in the local community. So thank you guys so much.
Okay, thank you. That was actually very helpful. At this point, any commissioner have any question for the applicant or his team? Mr. Pickett. Mr. Pickett.
Yeah, I'd asked the question of the parking facility that you have. I believe it's directly west across North Broadway. You're going to continue to use that when this new facility is completed?
Yeah, so one of the things we're looking at is when we start, hopefully start construction on the piece that we're talking about, which occupies that directly across from the showroom. That construction would stretch from Broadway all the way down to Main. So we would lose all of the capability of that real estate to utilize for business aspects. And just so you guys understand, you know, like with this coronavirus thing, when outdoor retail became available, us being a car dealership with cars parked outside, it gave us the unique ability to come back very quickly. And as a result, we've surpassed a lot of other dealerships that didn't have that capability. And, currently, you guys will be proud, we're #1 in the San Francisco region out of all those 57 stores for this month. And that's in partial because we were able to do that. So pretty exciting stuff. But yes, we would be needing this because we're going to run out of room. We currently stock anywhere between, in a low month, 400 new and 120 used. And when summer months, if we didn't have a lapse in production, we'd be facing roughly 600 to 700 new units and 150 used, plus employee parking, plus customer service parking, which our dealership does about 150 to 200 ROs a day, which is a repair order, meaning people are coming in and we're servicing those vehicles. So, you know, that space is critical. And when we lose that space on Broadway, this will be definitely an important piece of us being able to carry it on and continue doing business. And I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Do you own that piece across the street?
Yes, sir. That is owned by the family.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Kraselic.
Thank you, Chair. Brad, in Chip's report, he mentioned that the security gate would be open during the day. So I assume that you're looking to have people, they'd be free to wander in there, look at cars. Your salesman might send them down there to take a look. Is that true?
Yes, sir. So typically what we do for security is to make it not so ominous, and I don't want to get into the fence thing because, but we want to make sure that it's warm and inviting for people to look at cars. People enjoy looking at cars. We oftentimes see after hours or like early on Sunday mornings, people like to come and walk around when there's nobody there. And so we want it to be free to do that. We do deploy security that monitors our lot with some radius barriers. So if someone encroaches on the barrier, that it definitely alerts the security team, which can then communicate with them through the cameras and the radio. So we would use a blocker car is what we call it, where we park a car so it looks nice in front of the driveway to keep people from being able to drive cars out. But that way it's secure enough for us and still makes it inviting for the public and for us when we're showing vehicles.
So it seems like you just want this to be an open area and that a fence would not be an attractive sales feature of this site, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant and his team? Okay, for now, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing to the rest of the general public and ask our commission secretary, is there anyone from the rest of the public on the meeting who would like to make a public comment on this item?
Looking down our list, I'm not seeing anyone having use the raise hand feature, or if they're joining by phone, having pressed *9 on their device to alert me to their interest in providing comments. So I'd say at this point, Mr. Chair, there is no public comment on this item.
Okay, well then we'll go ahead and turn it back to the applicant to see if he has any closing remarks, or if you're good at this point.
Yeah, no, just thank you guys for the time and for allowing us to go through this with you. And we're excited to work with all of you in the future. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of each other as we get this project going. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and with that, we'll close the public hearing. And we'll bring it back to the commission for questions, comments, deliberation, motion. Any commissioners like to start us off? Commissioner Ward.
Well, it seems to me that demolishing that kind of the abandoned building and filling in the basement and using it temporarily as parking with landscaping and security is a significant upgrade from what's there right now, and would help the applicant to proceed with developing it in a more in a way that works better for everybody. So I can't see why we wouldn't. I'm in favor of this, and we should probably just move along and do it.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other commissioner comments to questions?
Chair Lezak,
Motions.
I would be, in light of what Melissa just said, I would be, well, I'll say that I've noticed that activity at Toyota has been increasing significantly over the last several years, not only in sales, but in service. They seem to be doing a good job, and they've been doing a lot of work upgrading the sites. So if there's no other issues or comments with other commissioners, I'm happy to move that we approve application Y19-129 for the temporary Toyota vehicle storage lot.
I'll second it.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick point of clarification. I actually was alerted by the senior engineer that there may be a discrepancy actually in the condition of approval relative to the condition number 18. And if I may, I'd like to read for the commission. I know we've had a motion in a second, but I believe we actually have a proposed change to reflect the right-of-way. I stand corrected. I earlier said 64 feet was correct. It turns out that was incorrect. It was a typo. And I'd like to read into the record for the commission's benefit the following change to condition number 18. And it reads as follows. The developer shall dedicate 7 feet of right-of-way at the property frontage or as determined necessary to meet a 37-foot half-width of the future street setback of 74 feet specified in the North Downtown Specific Plan. So the changes there are to strike the 32-foot reference to make it 37, and to strike 64 feet, replace it with 74 feet, and add the language specified in the North Downtown Specific Plan. I apologize for the change last minute at the dais, but I want the commission to have the appropriate language to act upon and to include in their condition. Apologies for the confusion this evening.
Thank you, Commission Secretary, and for the city engineer getting us the appropriate information in the timely manner. And we'll turn back to you, Commissioner Chris Selleck, or Vice Chair Chris Selleck, and ask if you wouldn't mind using that information to modify or update your motion before we move forward.
Thank you, Chair. I would update the motion to include the change that the Secretary read for us into the record.
Second again.
Still second it. Yeah.
Or third.
I heard a motion from Vice Chair Krasalik and a second by Commissioner Reiser. Is that correct? Okay.
One of the two, yes.
The amended motion. I'll take a roll call, Mr. Chair, if that's all right.
Please do.
Vice Chair Krasalik.
Yes.
Commissioner Reiser.
Yes.
Commissioner Ward.
Yes.
Commissioner Pickett.
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
And Chair Lezak.
Yes.
The ayes have it 7-0. The motion is approved.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you all. Well, congratulations to Toyota of Walnut Creek, and we really look forward to seeing the rest of the project come forward. Now we will go ahead and move forward in our agenda on to public hearing. Item number 4C, the project Fuego Tequila Grill conditional use permit, application number Y19-108.
Thank you, Chair Lizak.
I
My
think
name,
before we start with a staff presentation, I believe the commission secretary will want me to ask if any commissioners have had any ex parte communication. Apparently I'm supposed to do that and he keeps jumping in and doing it for me. So would any commissioners have anything to offer at this time?
No.
So I will jump in and say that I have had some communications over the last couple of years with the applicant, discussed his application or his interest in an application probably about 2 years ago. Perhaps some of his frustration with the change in the use permit requirements, which allowed others to be open and having music and entertainment where he was not able to do so. And I think the last communication I had with him was probably about a year ago. I definitely have spoken to him about this pending application. So with that, will any other commissioners have anything else to add? If not, we'll go ahead and move to you, Mr. Griffin, for a staff presentation.
thank you, Chair Lizak, and nor did I receive any correspondence. For the record, my name is Chip Griffin. I'm senior planner with the city of Walnut Creek, and I'm here tonight to share my screen. There it is. Right. Okay, so Fuego Tequila Grill, CUP, application Y19-108. It's an application to extend their hours of operation 1 hour, 7 days a week. The restaurant is located at 1359 Locust Street, with the green arrow pointing right at it. It block on the west side of Locust. It's zoned PR. There's surrounded by lots of shops and other restaurants. Let's see. Fuego was established with a design review and administrative use permit under Y14-117. They were able to operate for their first year with under the AUP rules with service and consumption up till 11 p.m. under findings and decision by staff. They then applied for an extension, and that was approved. I believe that PC Resolution 3758 is part of it attached to your staff report. That extension allowed them to serve alcoholic beverages till midnight, with all beverages off the table at 12:30. So in other words, last call at 12, off the table at 12:30. That was approved on 10/27/2016. They now request this extension to serve till, I didn't put that right. It should be 1 a.m. but business closes at 1:30. What happens when I hurry up doing these things? So let's be clear, alcohol services are requested to 1 a.m. with the business closing and all, or off the table at 1:30 a.m. There's a draft resolution to that effect. As far as the compliance history, there is a little bit of history. Their violations have been CUP violations, and I think there are some letters attached to the staff report that outline these a little bit more. They are for selling past the allowed hour of midnight. I believe that they were also, I believe that violation. Lieutenant Sean Connolly is here to also discuss the calls for service a little bit, but you do not have this graphic that's up right now in your staff report, but these are all the calls of service since January of 2018. There's, I believe, 16 of them, including the CUP violations. But most of these, if not all of these, were occurrences either outside the restaurant or people that came in the restaurant and weren't served for various reasons. Either they were already overserved. I believe there's one case where a guy came in and his knuckles were bleeding, and they brought him outside. He received medical attention there. There was another woman who was experiencing trouble on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. But to my knowledge, none of these calls for service came from the restaurant for issues that occurred and were initiated at the restaurant. And again, Lieutenant Connolly is here to expand on that a little bit. In discussions with Lieutenant Connolly and the police department, along with the planning department and the applicant, they were able to show that that they were willing to and were wanted to be in compliance. So they did that for the last 6 months as they came in with this application quite a while ago originally. So they've done that, and because of that, staff would recommend that the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution approving CUP as proposed. And again, that's to extend their business hours for service till 1 a.m. and for drinks off the table at 1:30. Let me say that this resolution also includes a couple other things that the previous resolution included. It included limitations on amplified music, which is now an allowed use by right in the PR district. And it also limited there was a whereas clause in that resolution that talked about their occupancy. The resolution in front of you, the draft resolution, is quiet on occupancy because that's to be determined by the fire district, and they've done that. And their occupancy is actually 103. So this resolution removes any limitations or what might be a limitation or construed as a limitation on occupancy. So with that, staff would recommend that the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution approving the CUP as proposed. Are there any questions of staff or of Lieutenant Connolly?
Commissioners, we'll start with Commissioner Ward.
I think this question's for Lieutenant Conley. Usually when people have a history of violations of the CUPs previously, there a little bit more time passes before they come back to us and ask for extensions of time in which to serve alcohol. And it seems like their last violation was fairly recent. And given that they've been closed for the last 3 months, I'm wondering, I just want your reassurance that you feel comfortable that they're being respectful of the requirements and are basically deserving of us extending the hours of alcohol service.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. Thank you for that question. Yes, we've been, myself, Ethan, and Chip, we've all been in conversation with Eddie through this process. We've gone back and forth with Mr. Schmidt to just to kind of say, hey, there needs to be a significant time passage here. I mean, he was wanting to apply for this much earlier and was asking for us to bring this before you guys much earlier than today. So I think he's done his due diligence. He's been dealing with some managers. I don't know if he's here tonight to speak on this, but I know there was a miscommunication with one of his managers, and he's made some changes in his staffing as a result of that. That was reassuring to me, and that the manager was being warned by officers saying, hey, you're out of compliance. You need to stay within your CUP. That wasn't happening, as you saw in the 2 violations that were noted in January and then again in February. So those were very concerning. The one in January is with Lieutenant Reese, and Mr. Schmidt had a conversation with her when she was under the alcohol permit manager's position. And then in February, I had a conversation with him as well. A warning letter was sent to him as a result of those violations, and he made some changes, which is good to see. I mean, a lot like what we saw with 1515. You know, there were some violations there, but we were able to have conversations about those and to work those out. So that brought confidence to me that Mr. Schmidt is willing to work with the police department and not just turning away from our recommendations. And then also the 2 violations that you saw in May and then again in September, those were just, you know, it's very competitive out there, and it's hard for, you know, they're trying to, restaurant owners and bar owners are trying to find ways to stay unique. And Mr. Schmidt brings a unique, I guess, a unique, what do I want to say, establishment downtown, because a lot of what you can see around there, I mean, Beer House across the street is probably the only other operating establishment right now. It's very quiet on Locust Street in that corner. So Mr. Smith's he's been pretty diligent in trying to revitalize that, bring some attention to that portion of town, which I applaud him for. But there were some alcohol service violations. It was more past the alcohol service times that were going on. And this was, you know, an officer would walk in at 10 after midnight or 14 after midnight and noted the violations. I read those police reports, and it didn't appear that the officer who made those observations interacted with staff at that point. They just made the observations and left. Perhaps they were sent to another call or something and couldn't make that interaction. But I did circle back with Mr. Smith on those CUP violations, and he was apologetic, receptive to what we had to say, and say, you know, hey, quite honestly, and quite frankly, you need to have a clear pattern of operation here before we can even think about bringing this before the commission, because we know how, again, we are too, we're very careful about who we approve to move past that midnight hour. And I believe he, you know, I want to use, learned his lesson from these CUP violations, and hopefully can move forward. But, you know, again, we could always do what we did with 1515, and that, you know, hey, for the next 6 months or maybe the next 12 months, if you can keep your establishment clean of CUP violations, and then we can move into a more permanent. That's what I would recommend at this point. I think Mr. Schmidt is good on his word. He does, when he says he's going to do something, he does it. So I think if we can't just approve it outright, if we could do something in effect that we could just give him a time to prove that he is responsible enough to have these extended hours and operate them within the capacity of the CUP.
Great, thank you very much. That's extremely helpful. I appreciate that.
Okay, other comments from commissioners? We'll go to Commissioner Pickett.
Condition number 8 says that on Friday and Saturday night, they'll have security until midnight, yet the consumption goes to 1:30. Why in the draft resolution would we want to have security stop an hour and a half before consumption stops?
That is a good question. That should be till closing.
Thank you.
Other commissioner questions for staff at this time? Okay, seeing none, if you don't mind, Lieutenant Conley, I'd like to personally ask you a couple of follow-up questions. You know, I appreciate your comments about the violations that were discussed on the CUP. I wanted to talk a little bit more about, you know, the other kinds of violations at the facility, other disorderly conduct, other public drunkenness, any of those kinds of things. Get your sense of, you know, have there been a history of any of those things? my limited perspective is that this is not exactly the kind of restaurant that attracts the type of folks who get in fights and have those kinds of issues. It seemed to me that it was a fairly upscale, very high quality restaurant, and that the folks that I saw dining there seemed probably to not be the troublemaking kind. And my perspective was a lot of the reaction and reason for all of the CUP work that we've been doing over the last several years to protect the community from having those kinds of issues as much as, that they needed to follow the CUP. But I wanted to hear you comment about, the other kinds of disorderly and disruptive calls that the police may or may not have had.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Lezak. Yeah, we haven't seen patterns like that. We're seeing, going back to even to 2016, where you're seeing, over serving or drunken public arrests coming out of there frequently. That's not the case here. I think what was going on with Fuego up until now too is that it's been operating as a restaurant, and there's been food service. They've had a pretty good food to service ratio as best they can. I think that the thing that would make it different, and I hope that this doesn't happen, is when tables are starting to be moved and there's dancing, there's DJs, extended service hours. So that's where I'm really cautious right now about this. I don't know if, quite honestly, if Mr. Schmidt has operated those conditions before, if he's managed that, or if he has the staff to manage that. And so that's why I'm carefully considering this, especially if it moves into a DJ dancing situation, perhaps after dinner hours, and then goes into 1:30, that we may see something. But I'm hoping not. I have faith in Mr. Schmidt. I have faith in the position where this restaurant is, that it's not going to be a significant draw on police resources, just because it is kind of a standalone, if you will, on that side of the street, aside from Beer House, which is not that type of venue. But to answer your question sort of an indirect way, I'm sorry, is that no, we haven't seen those patterns of behavior there, and it hasn't been a significant draw on us at all in the last couple of years. The big thing was just the CUP violations, quite honestly, was that he wasn't operating in a way that he should have been, and that was concerning to us as a police department, and I'm sure it'd be concerning to you as a planning commission. But other than that, it's been a well-run establishment.
Okay, well, it sounds like you were almost anticipating my closing question here, and that is, as you know, I really rely on your opinion, the police department in general, but you specifically because of your experience in terms of trying to, get comfortable with these. So I think what I've been hearing from you, but I'd like to ask a question directly. Do you support this application as the resolution is before us?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's all I need. Any other questions, comments from the commissioners before we move to the applicant's presentation? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and open the public hearing and invite the applicant to come forward and make a presentation or speak to us for up to 15 minutes.
Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak to you guys. Just to notate from what Lieutenant Connolly was mentioning, unfortunately, yes, there was some CUP violations that were concerning not only to Lieutenant Connolly, but to myself as well. We have prided ourselves with running what we consider to be a very safe environment, restaurant, and a place to hang out for people in Walnut Creek. We do and have tried to bring something a little bit different, just something that's gives people a different option to spend their evenings at. So during the time of the violations, that manager was warned upon the first violation and terminated on the second, which is why there hasn't been any more. The new managers were told very, very specifically that that was not going to be conduct that would be okay. and that they would be personally responsible for those. We were closed during April and May. We reopened in June. But prior to that, we were operating with our new managers under our CUP guidelines. And I personally was dropping by to spy, if you will, to make sure that everybody was taking the guidelines extremely seriously, because that's what was important to me. We've prided ourselves on not being a weight on the police department. As you've noted, we don't draw fights, we don't draw things of that sort. And the reason why we feel confident that we still will not draw that is because what we are proposing isn't something that draws those crowds. Our drinks are not, cheap well drinks. They're on the pricier side, which kind of usually pushes that kind of stuff away. We demand that people have certain dress codes and their behavior. And we're very, very strict as soon as we see people being that, if they're getting close to being overserved or they already came in intoxicated. On the chart presented by Mr. Griffin, there was an occasion in there where a gentleman came in inebriated already, and we turned him away, and he wasn't too happy about it. We don't want to be seen, and I'll never allow it to be seen as a bar where people go to get drunk. It's a restaurant and a venue for people to have a good time. But that good time has to be responsible. And if anybody is not following the guidelines that we want inside of the restaurant, we're, very quick to say, your night's over here, have a good night. So I do want to let the commission know that I take that very, very seriously. And when brought to my attention, I immediately made the changes that I felt were necessary to continue to run a business on a street that, quite frankly, for many years, we were completely alone on. Before Beer House came, we were basically by ourselves. But before that, we were the neighbors of two places that were quite problematic. Both were closed by you guys and the police department. But yet during that time period, we still didn't draw any of those people. The people who were being drawn to those establishments didn't come to ours because we made a point of not drawing that type of crowd. If you're looking for that type of venue, we're not it. So I do want to let the commission know that we take it very seriously, and we appreciate the opportunity for the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt, if you don't mind, would you state your full name for the record? The staff likes to have that.
Edward Schmidt, Jr.
All right, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and ask the commissioners if they have any questions for the applicant at this time. Okay, so seeing none, we will go ahead and open the public comment period to the rest of the public and ask the commission secretary if there is any member of the public who would wish to comment on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at our attendee list, I have not seen a change over the last 20 to 30 minutes. And of those present, I do see one member of the public wishing to make a comment. I'll ask my colleague, please, to bring Diane in for 3 minutes to make her comments to the commission. Diane, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You may go for 3 minutes. Please bring your comments.
Thank you. I appreciate listening to all of the comments that have been heard. And I'll open by saying that my general conclusion for now is to oppose the extension of the time because I really feel strongly that there hasn't been a substantive period of compliance. And I feel like, especially with the shutdown, that there needs to be a longer period. Unfortunately, I do appreciate the fact that this applicant has come to this committee at a difficult time because of the shutdown of the virus. coupled with the most recent discord and violence and looting and damage to downtown Walnut Creek, which has hurt all of the businesses. My tenants have been hurt. I do have, my property is on that block, a half a block away. And I have concern about extending hours that are going to be primarily associated with drinking, because these aren't going to be the dinner hours. These are going to be the drinking hours. And we all know what drinking in late hours can lead to. And Walnut Creek is already going to be suffering from lost revenue from all those gross rents that you're going to lose from the Broadway Plaza and the damage over there. My tenants already hurt from what's gone on with the pandemic. And I have a corridor along the side of my building that I struggle with because of what goes on late at night down there, from the businesses on that end of that block of Locust. And my corridor has to be cleaned up regularly with graffiti that shows up, and empty syringes and used condoms and wrappers and lots of things that come out of late night, for lack of a better word, loitering. I just think extending the hours of drinking is not necessarily a good thing to approve at this time. Perhaps if the applicant came in another 6 months with a longer period of compliance, I might feel differently. The other thing that I noted in his presentation, in response to one of your questions, specifically the question with regard to a history of difficult patrons getting out of control. He responded by saying there hadn't been a pattern of that, but he did not respond by saying that that had not been happening there. And I think there's a difference. So I don't know how extensive it's been. He said it, as he said, it wasn't a pattern, but it sounded to me like it had been happening. And I think extending the hours in a tumultuous time in our community is of concern to me. That day that I was down there with my contractor, that was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when we were putting up plywood. I work in Oakland. I carry a stun gun and mace. I never thought I'd have to go down to Walnut Creek with my stun gun and my mace and have my contractor bring a gun with him. But that's what happened at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday. And I just don't think now's the time to extend the hours down there. And I would recommend revisiting this in 6 months with a longer, more established substantive period of compliance. And also some information that there isn't any bad behavior coming from the patrons.
Thank you for that comment, Diane. I think we're kind of at that 3-minute point, so we'll go ahead and ask the commission secretary if there's any other members of the public that would like to make a comment on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking over our guest list, none of the attendees are currently raising their hands, nor is anyone signaled *9 if they're dialing in by phone, and therefore I do not believe there are any comments. I also have checked our online public comments forum via email and have not received any during the public hearing item.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and go back now to the applicant and see if Mr. Schmidt is interested in making any closing remarks, rebuttal to any of the other public comment this evening. Mr. Schmidt, you have up to 15 minutes. I doubt you'll need that.
That's 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lezak. To comment real fast on what I believe her name was Diane mentioned. Yes, the looting took us all by storm. We were open and our kitchen was preparing, and we saw the looting firsthand. We had looters running in front of our restaurant. I actually took it upon myself, because I was informed by multiple people that there was going to be possible looting, to contact Mr. Griffin on the day before the looting, and he contacted Lieutenant Conley. As I am a person who cares about my community, I live in Walnut Creek, and my restaurant's in Walnut Creek. I wanted, in case the police didn't know, to notify them, hey, there might be something going on. I took it upon myself to contact Mr. Griffin, and Mr. Griffin then contacted Lieutenant Conley, because I wanted to know what we should do as a restaurant. We're very proud of not only the way the restaurant is run, but the patrons who come into our restaurant. We do not have problematic people in our restaurant. And this is a very hard time economically because of the pandemic and all the limitations that are going to come with the pandemic. And not extending our hours would put our future in jeopardy, because it's quite frankly limiting businesses right now. Is going to be something that could cause businesses to go out of business. I'm not saying that to be responsible about it, of course not. And that's why we have taken the precautions necessary to run a good business. We've forced better training, new staffing, and had constant contact with the Walnut Creek PD in order to correct the CUP violations. But we are very proud that behavior such as the one that Diane mentioned isn't coming from Fuego. And Lieutenant Conley made that mention. And people who come to the restaurant will tell you it's not a place that draws that type of behavior. So I do request that our application be approved, because I feel like we bring something to the community that's desperately needed, especially in this time of the pandemic. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt. At this time, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and we will return to the commission for commissioner comments, questions, deliberation, motion. Would any of the commissioners like to start us off? We'll start with Commissioner Ward. Thank you.
Okay, well, I have two questions. The first is just to confirm, I mean, we're operating under kind of pandemic COVID or health order situation here. So this is kind of a theoretical application, correct? I mean, we can't socially distance and cram into, a restaurant and dance at this point. So am I correct in thinking that this all change is, except for the extending the drinking hours, is dependent on those health orders being changed in format?
I think we'll serve that one up to Chip, huh?
Yeah.
Is that a city staff or is that a city attorney?
No, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. So I just
the difference might be is if for one reason or another that they are allowed to serve outside during COVID.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm personally hopeful that that'll be the case, but and I don't know, dancing in the streets could break out, who knows? But all right, and my second question is
6 feet apart.
Yes, always, except for people in your household, if you still like them, which is unclear. So it's there was a suggestion that perhaps we do a 6-month conditional of this, but also Lieutenant Conley seems to support us approving the extension of hours as is. And I just wanted to confirm again that if we did approve it as written, and there were a number of incidents that were inconsistent with our expectations with regard to later service, that we could pull that back and change it as we've done with other restaurants and bars in town. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right.
Sorry, Brian.
No, that's okay. I'll confirm as well that yes, the Planning Commission will maintain jurisdiction over the CUP, and in the event of issues or violations, the CUP would come back to the Planning Commission for review, and conditions could be added, and the permit could be modified.
Great. Thank you, Brian. It sounded a lot better the way you said it. So I appreciate that.
I think for clarification, that would be condition number 30 in the resolution under the compliance section.
That's correct.
And it includes revocation, if necessary.
Okay.
And I guess while I've piped in, I would just confirm Commissioner Ward's question earlier regarding the county health orders, and I think we're all on the same page. But if approved, the CUP would be in place, and Fuego would be subject to the county orders, just like any other existing restaurant or alcohol serving establishment that has a CUP to a specific time. So distancing, occupancy requirements, things that might be imposed through health orders, they would still apply just like they'd apply to anybody else.
Great. Thank you very much for clarifying that. That was my understanding. I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page here.
Okay, who would like to be next? We'll go up to Commissioner Anderson next.
Thank you. We probably all noticed this is a very similar application to the 1515 restaurant we did a few weeks ago. And there was something, well, at first, as I recall, there was actually a fairly similar time period that had elapsed since their last, serious violation. Might have been a little bit longer than what we're looking at here, but I think it's still within the same range. Something I brought up with 1515, bring it up again tonight, is finding 4 of the alcoholic beverage sales ordinance required by that ordinance. Says the proposed use is not located within a high crime area. And then the explanation says, well, it actually is, but there hasn't been a lot of crime, or various mitigating circumstances here. As I noted earlier, in the previous application, the plan doesn't say it's not a high crime area unless there's some mitigating circumstances. It's a very specific mandatory finding. I'm willing to support the application, given that the mitigations do indicate that it's sort of within the intent of the law. But I get a little bit nervous since it's really not right there with the letter of the law. And I would ask the staff to perhaps take a look at that required finding and see if there is some way that they might modify that so that it does permit for some consideration of the actual record of that area.
I'm happy to briefly speak. Sorry, Commissioner Anderson, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm happy to briefly speak to that condition. That's a long-standing condition in the ordinance. My understanding is that under that Business and Professions Code definition, our entire core area would be considered a high crime area under that definition. And so that's frankly a finding that has been in our ordinance with all other alcohol serving establishments. It's been effectively ignored. And we've sort of acknowledged that in the core area that definition does apply, and it is technically a high crime area. And so in sum, what I would say is, I think when we update this provision of the ordinance, that would be a provision that is likely to come right out of the ordinance.
That would make me feel better. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, for additional feedback, I would tell you that my interpretation, because clearly not ignoring that, but my interpretation has been more focused on the verbiage where it says, or where a disproportionate number of police calls occur. And so in the absence of being able to control the type of crime area within the city, my interest has been the questions I've been focused on with the lieutenant about the disproportionate number of calls, and in particular about this particular establishment and its generation of those calls. So that's
it.
That's how I've tried to respond to that condition.
And that's a good clarification, Chair Lezak. I think the the finding itself as to the concept of being in a high crime area is one thing. When it's tied to the specific definition, that's where we've really not tied that to the specific business and professions code definition. So thanks for that clarification.
I want to suggest, given the chair's comments, that one way to approach this would be when you do look at changing our ordinance, is to change the or to an and you'd be just fine.
Yeah, it's frankly confusing and admittedly. It's taken.
Clearly, Commissioner Anderson has got his attorney cap on, and he's wanting to make sure he's being as accurate as possible. So we thank you for that. Other commissioners, Commissioner Pickett, would you like to step forward now?
Yeah, I'm not overly fearful of the change requested by the applicant, but I also think might be wise for us to proceed cautiously on this. You know, I'm still feeling the pain of 5 or 6, 7 years ago when we had problems downtown, and we're continuing to increase the hours of alcohol service downtown. Someplace it's going to break, and I liked the idea of a 6-month period after which it's reviewed. That keeps the applicant particularly diligent and gives him 6 months to establish the practice and satisfy us that the recent violations were an anomaly, and the next 6 months is our expectations for the future. So I would lean toward some language that would include a 6-month probationary period, or whatever we want to call it. And I think it was 15-15 we did that for, or yeah. So I would encourage us to think about that, but you know, we'll see what other commissioners say. Thank you.
Vice Chair Kruselic.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in agreement with Commissioner Pickett. I think Lieutenant Connolly was 98% sure there weren't going to be any problems here, but he had that 1 or 2% where he was still just a little concerned. I'm very happy to support extending the hours for 6 months like we did with 15-15 and have them come back, and assuming everything goes well, we can approve it at that point.
Thank you for that comment. Any other commissioners want to step in? Commissioner Strongman, Commissioner Reiser, going. So I'll add to that I wouldn't be necessarily opposed to the 6-month conditional. However, I really don't feel strongly that I would need it to support this. But I do understand Lieutenant Connolly's reasoning, and that is that where I could probably be comfortable with the restaurant and alcohol service continuing to the extra hours, what makes this a new business operation is the change in the movement of the tables and the addition of the music. And I can see that could possibly change the character of the restaurant at that time. And since I'm unlikely to be awake at that time, I probably won't see it. So it would be interesting to know, to hear back on this. The only other comment I have about the 6-month thing, though, is that if everything goes well and the establishment has no violations and staff believes that it's appropriate to do so, I wouldn't mind trying to figure out a way to make this an administrative shift. It feels to me like if everything's good, that they don't really need to come back to have a permit. That we're granting them a use permit subject to some kind of probationary period or something. And that assuming that administratively his probation officer, who we'll call Lieutenant Conley at this moment, says it's okay, I would think that would be sufficient administratively for me to allow the conversion of the permit. And it would only be to me that I would want to see it again in 6 months if for some reason Lieutenant Conley wanted to not allow that current condition to continue and wanted to either modify it or drop it back to the older use permit. So that's just something for others to think about in terms of how we might address a resolution.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, I don't want to be overly burdensome, but I also, for the benefit of our community, I want to be cautious. I think we should be cautious. And if we could craft something that created a probationary period with an easy out for the review, if there isn't a concern, perhaps either city staff or the police department could say, review and report to us and say, this is what we found. And we are going to remove the probationary period or something like that. If we could craft some language, I would like to see that. I just think it's our duty to, move forward on alcohol service increases within the core area of downtown.
So I'm inclined to agree with all that, but I'm just concerned that the new proposed use isn't going to be viable anytime this year or anytime soon. And I would hate to start the clock running on a 6-month probationary period when there's no way to test the items that we're actually concerned about. So I think it's great that we have it be administratively done on the basis of not having any violations, but if they're not moving tables and having live music and dancing, then they really haven't tested that condition at all. So I think that the timing should start when they actually start using the restaurant in that way, so that we can make sure that there aren't violations of the conditions that we're setting with a reasonable period of time, rather than letting 6 months go when they're not using it that way and then say, oh, you're good, we're not gonna do anything about it. So
that's a real good point. And I'm not sure how to, I mean, I don't have a good language to say that, but I think that's a really good point. If they don't have full operation of their business, we don't have a good probationary test. So
I think we could say 6 months from the time they start that they're allowed to do that. That's a pretty bright line, I think, with the health department orders when they change that they're able to do it. I just don't want to 6 months of them not doing it. And
so 6 months starting at the time that the county health department lifts restrictions on bar restaurant activities or something to that effect. Yeah.
Hold on a second. So real quick, do you have a comment there, Assistant City Attorney Hickey?
I do. And the only concern I have with that scheme would be in setting up that way would be the fact that I think that if you have it automatically kick in 6 months, then you run the risk of if there were to be issues, you don't have the same due process in not sort of continuing what you've granted that you already have under the municipal code. So with 1515, we said, come back, have a full hearing, and then it'll be granted if there are no issues. I think going the other way potentially creates some issues where there's an argument to be made that you're revoking a right, even though you're granting that right temporarily, because CUPs generally aren't granted temporarily. They're generally granted and they run with the land, and they're subject to the modification or revocation provisions in the code. And so I shudder a little bit at setting it up in reverse, where you set up a potential argument where you're revoking something, even though the argument is you didn't fully grant it in the first place. So my recommendation would be to, if you wanted to do the 6 month trial period, to do it in the manner that was done with 1515 and not delegate that to staff.
What if we did it? Yeah. What if we did it for 12 months? We're still taking a little risk that we don't get a good example, but the probabilities are very, very high that within a 12-month period, they will have 6 months of full-blown operation. And that maybe that's the best we can do. Make it a definitive thing, but make it a 12-month probationary period, which allows them to gear up as the pandemic restrictions are lifted and as they ease and they get into full-blown operation. Maybe they'll end up having a 9-month period to full-blown operation. maybe it'll only be 5 months, but at least we'll have a definitive time frame for the applicant to be aware of, and we know it's going to come back to us, and we'll look at it, and it stretches it out. It gives the applicant a little longer time frame maybe of uncertainty, but the burden's on the applicant to prove to us anyhow. And if he's going to do it for 6 months, he can do it for 12 months because we're expecting him to do it forever. So
in that instance, and sort of hearkening back to the 15-15 model, then the CUP would basically have language in it that said that it automatically expires in 1 year from the effective date, unless the applicant comes back to the commission, has a hearing before that time, and the commission then finds that they've met those requirements of not having any incidents, and it's granted in perpetuity after that.
yeah, I would like to make a motion to that effect, to approve the use permit with the provision of a 12-month probationary period, and the condition that talked about security, condition number 8 that talked about security hours, changing it from 9 p.m. to closing. And with those two, I'd like to make a motion for approval.
And go ahead, Commissioner Strongman.
I'll second.
I was just going to add that I do have some language that I can read into the record to effectuate the 12-month period that would be, effectively identical to the language we used in 15-15, but for the 12-month period instead of 6 months. And I can do that at your pleasure.
Yes, I would appreciate that.
And hold on just a second, Assistant City Attorney. Vice Chair Krasalik, you had your hand raised. Did you have any other comments or anything you wanted to add before we go ahead and read other information and take a vote on this?
No, Commissioner Hickey and Commissioner Pickett took care of my question.
Thanks for the promotion.
I'm sorry.
The other thing I would ask is, I don't know if the applicant's still on the Zoom, but I do think it's important to, given that we're sort of modifying the general structure of the CUP, and there's precedent for this. We've done it before, but my recollection is last time we also did it with the applicant acknowledging that on the record that they were okay, knowing that it was going to automatically expire unless there was a subsequent hearing. So I think that confirmation would be important as well.
Yeah, and so I'll go ahead and ask the applicant to join the group right now, solely for the purpose of answering this question. So, Mr. Smith, the question being put before you, and we want to try to make it possible for you to succeed as much as possible, is could you accept this additional condition where your use permit would be approved, but would be limited to a 12-month period, and ask you to return again for an additional hearing?
Before I answer that question, Chair Lezak, I do want to make a comment. Our plan is to commence with, of course, everything that has to do with the county health regulations, with the live music, and the county health doesn't not permit live music. It wants to maintain social distancing and space in between and what have you. But we're going to commence with that right away. So the only thing I would say is the comment made that, well, we wouldn't be able to get really a good test on if we're running the business properly in 6 months rather than 12. We would start it day one as soon as we could with DJs and things of that sort, because although we have to maintain people apart per se, they're still going to want to have a good time, and we're still going to want to at least get the word out there that we're doing it. With that being said, I'm more than happy to do whatever the commission feels is necessary to prove that we deserve this opportunity. So whatever the commission thinks is best, of course, we'll go along with it.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Schmidt, for stepping in. We're going to ask you to step away from the dais for now, or return to the commission deliberation. Having said that, how do you feel about your current motion on the table, Commissioner Pickett?
I would let it stand.
And Commissioner Strongman, you've got
Yes.
a second.
Let it stand.
So we'll go ahead and ask the Assistant City Attorney to go ahead and add some supporting language to those conditions for the motion before we take a vote.
Thanks, Chair Lezak. So first, just to clarify, planning condition number 8, security will be from 9 p.m. till close of business. And then at the end, after section 30, there would be a new section titled expiration that would read as follows. And bear with me, I'm just going to read this into the record. The resolution shall automatically expire on start again. This resolution shall automatically expire on, what's the date today, somebody?
Oh.
No. June 22nd, 2021. So that's the date that's 1 year after the effective date. This will become effective on June 22nd, 2020. So this resolution shall automatically expire on June 22nd, 2021, 12 months after the effective date, and shall revert back to the prior approval granted by City of Walnut Creek Planning Commission Resolution number 3758, adopted on October 27th, 2016. Prior to expiration, the Planning Commission shall conduct a public hearing to consider extending indefinitely the effectiveness of this resolution, subject to the same applicable criteria set forth in Walnut Creek Municipal Code section 10-2.4.605, conditional use permit findings, and Walnut Creek Municipal Code section 10-2.3.1210, alcoholic beverage sales ordinance.
Okay, so with that, and I'll take that to be an acceptable addition to your motion, Commissioner Pickett, and we'll go ahead and ask the Commission Secretary to go ahead and take the vote.
Thank you, Chair Lezak. Commissioner Pickett?
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman?
Yes.
Commissioner Ward?
Yes.
Commissioner Reiser?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kerselik?
Yes.
And Chair Lezak?
Yes.
The ayes have it 7-0. The motion as amended is approved.
Okay, well, congratulations, Mr. Schmidt. We look forward to seeing you again, hopefully sooner than a year from now, but definitely a year from now. So thank you. And we'll go ahead and move forward now with the agenda. We're moving out of the public hearing section. We're going to move to commission's considerations. And I will, at this point, ask staff if there are any commission considerations.
There are none, Mr. Chair.
And so then we'll move to commission member and staff reports or announcements. We'll ask the commission chair, but also the commissioners, whether or not they have any reports or announcements to make. Anyone?
Nope.
All right, well, seeing none.
I actually have a quick announcement, a bit of good news to share with the commission, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So I recently learned in the last couple of days that the City of Walnut Creek was awarded the Northern California American Planning Association's Award of Merit in the category of planning agency for all the important work that my staff in the planning division, as well as the housing staff and the housing division under the guidance of Margot Ernst, the housing program manager, have accomplished in 2019 over the last year in the areas of innovation, quality, outreach, and implementation for the following projects, many of which appeared before this body, including the West Downtown and North Downtown specific plans, the Rethinking Mobility Transportation Demand Management Strategic Plan, the Climate Action Plan and its implementation, Affordable housing outreach was an effort undertaken by the Housing Division, as well as the Blueprint for Success version 2. I just want to say that I'm very proud to recognize my staff. I appreciate the APA's recognition, and I wanted to share that bit of good news with the commission this evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commission Secretary. And I also understand that that was just the first step, that you're actually in the running at state level for the next level award. So we'll wish you luck with that.
We are. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Do the new commissioners get to brag about that?
Yes.
Yeah, that actually, well, and it actually goes on the commission resume as well, in bold. Yes. So we want to thank you all for coming this evening. With that, we'll adjourn the Thursday, June 11th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting at 9:01 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Night all.